Some portraits survive for centuries, yet the faces they once held have vanished. We look at the canvas, the mosaic, or the stone relief, and we see the posture, the weight of gold, and the intricate detail of a collar. But where the eyes should meet ours, there is only a void, a jagged scrape of paint, a shattered cluster of tiles, a smooth, intentional erasure. These are not remnants of simple decay or the slow crawl of time. They are deliberate absences. When we stand before these frames, the silence is heavy. It is a physical weight that forces us to look closer at the damage. The edges of the missing features are sharp, showing the force of a chisel or the frantic drag of a blade. Why would someone spend hours or even days hunting down a face to scrub it from existence? This is not just a loss of pigment or stone. It is a calculated act of violence against memory itself. Every missing face creates an unsettling mystery, a permanent scar on the record of the past. We are left staring at a ghost, a figure frozen in time, waiting for an identity that will never return. Welcome to Dark Future Archive. In this episode, we move beyond the surface of the canvas to confront the faces that were hunted, scrubbed, and silenced. We are not merely looking at art. We are examining the sites of a long-running conflict. These portraits, icons, and funerary images have become battlegrounds where the past is constantly being rewritten. We will track the methods used to erase these figures, from the cold precision of political condemnation to the frantic, ritualized destruction of religious iconoclasm. Every missing face we encounter is a clue in a much larger puzzle. We will consult the records of long-dead patrons and analyze the pigment under the microscope to determine why these specific individuals were targeted. History does not simply forget. It often makes a conscious choice to excise. By investigating these voids, we uncover the fears and the power dynamics that demanded such total erasure. Join us as we peel back the layers of these historical scars to reveal the truth that remains hidden in the empty space. To understand why a face is removed, we must first understand what a face represents. The human face is the primary anchor of identity. It is the first point of recognition, the map of a person's character, and the singular feature that separates an individual from the anonymous crowd. In the traditions of ancient portraiture, the face was far more than a collection of features. It was the vessel of the soul, the definitive proof of legitimacy, and the ultimate target of devotion. When a patron commissioned a work, they were not just paying for a likeness. They were investing in a permanent presence. To look at a portrait was to engage in a dialogue with the person depicted. Because the face held this immense power, it became the focal point of human interaction. Consequently, to damage that face is to commit a symbolic murder. It is not merely an attack on a piece of wood, stone, or canvas. It is a direct, calculated act of violence against memory itself. By striking at the eyes, the nose, or the mouth, the perpetrator seeks to sever the subject from the living world. They are not just erasing a pigment. They are attempting to kill the influence, the authority, and the very history that the face was designed to preserve. We begin our investigation with the faces removed by the cold hand of state power. In the sprawling courts of ancient Egypt and the marble halls of Rome, the death of a ruler was rarely the end of their influence. A new successor often viewed the image of their predecessor not as a memory to be honored, but as a political threat to be neutralized. When a pharaoh ascended to the throne, the first order of business was frequently the systematic erasure of the one who came before. We see this in the physical evidence left on temple walls and funerary monuments. A craftsman would be ordered to take a chisel to the stone, methodically grinding away the nose, the lips, and the chin. They did not destroy the entire statue, they left the body intact, but they rendered the face a smooth, featureless mask. This was not the work of aimless vandals. It was a calculated, political necessity. By removing the face, the successor severed the vital link between the person and their legacy. They transformed a powerful king into a nameless ghost. In the Roman Senate, the erasure of an individual was not merely a political preference. It was a formal judicial sentence known as damnatio memoriae. This was the condemnation of memory, a legal mechanism that treated a person's reputation as a criminal entity to be hunted down and executed. When a public figure fell from grace or a tyrant was overthrown, the state did not just exile the living, they launched a campaign against the dead. The decree was absolute. It mandated the systematic destruction of every record that bore the offender's name or likeness. Sculptors were dispatched to public squares and private villas to hunt down busts and reliefs. They did not stop at the face. They struck at inscriptions on pedestals, erased names from public documents, and smashed coins bearing the disgraced profile. It was a total war against the past. By turning memory into a crime, the Roman state ensured that the individual would cease to exist in the collective consciousness. To look upon a defaced Roman bust today is to witness the final verdict of that court. The void left behind is the physical manifestation of a death sentence. Listen to the sound of the chisel striking granite. It is a rhythmic, biting sound that echoes through the silence of the tomb. The craftsman does not rush. He places the steel edge against the bridge of the nose and strikes. A flake of stone falls away. He strikes again, and the eyes, once wide and alert, vanish into a cloud of gray dust. This is the precise moment of erasure. The pharaoh's features, carved to last for 10,000 years, are reduced to rubble in seconds. Watch as the tool moves across the cheekbones, flattening the curve of the jaw and the line of the lips. The stone does not bleed, but the effect is identical to a mortal wound. Where there was once a specific individual, there is now only a smooth, featureless mask. This is not just a change in texture. It is a fundamental shift in the statue's purpose. By removing the face, the successor strips the soul of its earthly anchor. The face is gone, and with it, the bridge to the afterlife is permanently collapsed. Why go to such lengths? Why spend the treasury's gold to hunt down every stone likeness across the empire? This was never about simple vandalism or the heat of a momentary rage. It was a cold, calculated political necessity. In the ancient world, an image was a functional vessel of power. A portrait of a predecessor was not merely a decoration. It was a rallying point for dissent. As long as the rival's face remained visible in the public square, their claim to the throne remained active. The successor understood a fundamental truth of governance. If the people could still see the face of the one who came before, they could still imagine a return to that order. By systematically scrubbing the features from the stone, the new ruler was not just erasing a man, they were severing the artery of a legacy. Every strike of the chisel was a strategic move to isolate the current regime from the past. It was an act of administrative hygiene, intended to ensure that the rival's influence could no longer find a foothold in the minds of the living. It was a war of legitimacy, fought with hammers. Once the stone is smoothed, the transformation of the public consciousness begins. The successor knows that a blank space is a powerful tool of persuasion. Citizens walk past the monument, expecting to see the familiar gaze of the old ruler, but they find only a void. That sudden, jarring emptiness forces a mental reset. Without a face to anchor their loyalty, the memory of the predecessor begins to drift. It becomes harder to whisper a name when the image no longer provides a focal point. The successor capitalizes on this disorientation. They install new banners, commission new reliefs, and dictate new narratives that fill the silence left by the missing features. The public is no longer invited to remember. They are instructed to move on. By systematically removing the visual evidence of the rival, the new regime ensures that the fallen leader cannot inspire a revolt from the grave. The people look at the blank stone and see only the authority of the present. The triumph is total. The past is not just defeated, it is rendered invisible, unrecognizable, and ultimately irrelevant. With the face gone, the successor claims the narrative, turning the public square into a mirror that reflects only their own undisputed reign. The erasure has succeeded in its final, most dangerous goal, the complete redirection of the collective future. The logic of the chisel changes as we cross the threshold into the medieval era. The focus shifts from the halls of secular power to the interior of the cathedral. In the Byzantine world, the portrait is no longer just a political instrument. It is a conduit for the divine. We move away from the calculated removal of a rival's claim to the throne and enter the volatile age of iconoclasm. Here, the stakes are not about who holds the crown, but about what the image itself is doing to the soul of the observer. The motivation for erasure undergoes a profound metamorphosis. It is no longer about silencing a political ghost, but about neutralizing a spiritual force. A face on a wall or a panel is now viewed as an active participant in the spiritual life of the community. It is a bridge to the heavens, or perhaps a dangerous distraction. The act of destruction becomes a form of theological defense. Where once a ruler sought to protect their reign, the iconoclast now seeks to protect the faith. The erasure is no longer a matter of administrative hygiene, but a ritualized confrontation with the sacred. The face is the primary target of the war. During the height of religious reform, the portrait undergoes a terrifying transformation. A saint, once a beacon of intercession, is suddenly recast as a spiritual hazard. The donor, depicted in prayer at the feet of the divine, becomes a target of intense suspicion. These images are no longer seen as static art or passive representations of piety. Instead, they are treated as active, dangerous entities that hold a grip on the faithful. The iconoclast approaches the panel with a singular, urgent purpose. They do not merely want to hide the figure, they want to break the influence it exerts. The process is precise and brutal. A blade is drawn across the eyes, rendering the saint blind to the world of the living. The nose is flattened with a hammer, stripping the figure of its human dignity. The mouth is scrubbed away, silencing the prayers that once seemed to echo from the paint. This is not casual vandalism. It is a systematic dismantling of a perceived threat. Every stroke of the chisel is an attempt to sever the connection between the viewer and the depicted. The image is stripped of its power, reduced to a hollow shell, and left to serve as a warning to anyone who might still seek guidance from the silent, broken faces on the wall. The fear was not of the paint itself, but of the gaze. To stand before an icon was to be watched. The painted eyes, rendered with startling clarity, seemed to track the observer across the cold stone floor of the nave. For the believer, this was a comfort. For the iconoclast, it was an intrusion. They believed the image possessed a latent, tethered power, a capacity to judge or influence the living from beyond the veil of the canvas. This was a psychological standoff. Every time a person entered the room, the image demanded a response, a bow, a prayer, a moment of submission. The iconoclast felt this demand as a physical weight, a constant pressure on their own autonomy. They could not simply walk away, for the eyes remained fixed on their path. To break the image was to reclaim the space. By gouging out the pupils, they were not just damaging a surface, they were severing a connection that felt uncomfortably alive. They sought to silence the silent, to blind the one that saw too much. The decision to destroy is rarely a sudden impulse. It begins in the quiet corners of the workshop, where the tools of reclamation are gathered. The air in the room grows heavy, charged with the metallic scent of iron and the grit of stone dust. A heavy-headed hammer is pulled from a workbench, its handle worn smooth by years of labor, now repurposed for a darker task. Beside it, a set of steel chisels lies in wait, their edges sharpened to a razor-fine point. These are not the instruments of a creator, but the cold, unyielding agents of erasure. The iconoclast grips the hammer, testing its balance, feeling the cold vibration of the metal against their palm. Each tool is inspected with a clinical, detached focus. There is no joy in this preparation, only a grim, mechanical necessity. The chisels are laid out in order of size, ready to bite into the plaster and wood that hold the sacred figures. The silence of the room is absolute, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of a whetstone against steel. Every movement is deliberate, every preparation measured. The icons remain on the walls, oblivious to the preparations unfolding just feet away. The hammer is raised, the chisel is positioned against the surface, and for one final suspended second, the world holds its breath. The first strike is not a clean cut. It is a jarring, percussive thud that sends a spiderweb of cracks radiating across the saint's forehead. Dust blooms into the air, white and choking. The iconoclast does not hesitate. The chisel finds the corner of the left eye, biting deep into the plaster. With a sharp twist of the wrist, the tool levers upward, prying a jagged flake of pigment from the base. The saint's painted iris, once vibrant and steady, is suddenly bisected by a raw, dark furrow. There is no mercy in the motion. The attacker shifts their stance, driving the steel point into the center of the pupil. The wood beneath the paint groans, splintering under the concentrated force. A second, harder blow follows, shattering the delicate layers of oil and gesso. The eye is gone, replaced by a hollow, irregular pit that catches the dim light of the room. The attacker moves to the right eye, the chisel tip tracing the curve of the brow before plunging into the socket. The sound is dry and grating, like bone against stone. With a final, violent wrench, the remaining fragments of the iris are scraped away. The saint is left staring into nothingness, the gaze permanently extinguished by the cold, biting edge of the steel. The work continues. The chisel moves down the bridge of the nose, a ridge of pigment that once defined the saint's profile. Each blow is measured, a rhythmic clatter that echoes against the stone walls. The steel bites into the bridge, shearing away the delicate layers of paint until the nose is flattened into a featureless, jagged scar. The iconoclast does not pause. The hammer falls again and again, turning the once refined features into a rough, uneven landscape. There is a cold, mechanical cadence to the destruction. The tool shifts lower, finding the curve of the upper lip. The mouth, which once held the suggestion of a prayer, becomes the next target. The chisel digs into the corners, prying the lips away. The mouth is scrubbed clean, the pigment scraped down to the bare, unyielding surface beneath. Every strike is a deliberate act of hostility. The jawline is chipped, the chin is pitted, and the once human form is now a hollow, unrecognizable void. The silence returns. The iconoclast stands back, the chisel still gripped tight in a sweat-slick palm. The image is unrecognizable, a battlefield of gouged wood and missing features. Yet, the act was never about mere surface damage. It was a calculated strike against a perceived threat. To those who swung the hammer, the painted eyes were not just pigment, they were conduits. They believed the image possessed a gaze that could influence the living, a spiritual weight that lingered in the room like smoke. By blinding the saint, they were not just destroying a portrait, they were severing a tether. They acted on the conviction that if the image could no longer see, it could no longer witness, judge, or intercede. Each jagged furrow in the wood was a deliberate attempt to drain the icon of its power. They were dismantling a bridge to the divine, convinced that by erasing the face, they were breaking the spiritual hold that had bound them to the image for generations. The silence in the chamber is no longer empty. It is the sound of a broken connection. The face has been rendered mute, its capacity to command or comfort extinguished by the cold, iron logic of the reformers. They believed that by killing the image, they were finally setting their own spirits free. The final blow is not a tap, but a heavy, decisive strike. The hammer connects with the center of the mosaic, and the wall erupts. Tiny, colored glass tiles, cobalt, gold, and deep crimson burst outward like shrapnel. They skitter across the stone floor, clicking and clattering, into the dark corners of the chamber. Dust rises in a thick, gray cloud, catching the dim light as the image of the deity begins to lose its coherence. The grout crumbles, unable to hold the weight of the assault. Where the eyes once held a steady, eternal gaze, there is now only a jagged, irregular hole. The surrounding tiles fall away in clusters, pulled down by the gravity of the ruin. A section of the forehead slides off, clattering against the plinth, followed by the jagged remains of the cheeks. The destruction is absolute. Within seconds, the intricate geometry of the face is gone, replaced by a raw, gaping cavity. In the wall, the dust settles slowly, coating the floor in a fine, pale powder. What remains is a haunting, hollow silhouette. The deity is no longer present. It has been reduced to a scarred expanse of mortar and broken glass. The void stares back, an empty, silent witness. The air in the chamber finally clears, leaving behind a stillness that feels heavy and absolute. Rows of portraits line the walls, but they are no longer a congregation of saints or dignitaries. They have become a gallery of ghosts. Each frame holds a body, a hand, or a decorative border, but the center of every composition is a hollowed-out silence. Where features once defined a personality, there is only the rough texture of exposed mortar or the jagged edge of torn canvas. These figures are trapped in a state of permanent erasure, forever unable to meet the gaze of those who pass by. They are stripped of their identity, rendered mute by the deliberate violence of the past. Without eyes, they cannot observe the world. Without mouths, they cannot speak their names. They stand as remnants of a forgotten hierarchy, anchored to their frames but detached from their history. The light catches the uneven edges of the damage, casting long, distorted shadows across the empty spaces where faces once looked out. Not every erasure is born of human rage. Sometimes, the world itself acts as the destroyer, working with a slow, indifferent patience that no chisel can match. In the damp corners of ancient vaults, moisture creeps behind the plaster, swelling the wall until the pigment simply loses its grip. It flakes away in microscopic scales, drifting to the floor like snow. In coastal ruins, salt air does the work of 1,000 blades. The crystals grow within the porous stone, expanding and fracturing the surface until the features of a portrait are pushed off, grain by grain, into oblivion. Fire, too, plays its part. A sudden heat spike in a long-abandoned villa does not just scorch the canvas, it blisters the oil, causing the paint to bubble and peel away from the weave. These are not acts of political spite or religious fervor. There is no intent here, no desire to silence a specific name or erase a particular legacy. It is merely the chemistry of the environment, reclaiming the materials. Where the iconoclast leaves a jagged, angry scar, time leaves a soft, blurred ghost. The face does not vanish in a moment of violence. It fades into the background. When the paint finally gives way to the elements, the name usually follows the face into the dark. We are left with the archives of the nameless. A hand rests forever on the back of a chair, fingers curled around a wooden rail, but the person who owned that hand is gone. A ring glints on a finger, a sign of status or marriage, yet the record of the wearer has dissolved into dust. These are the ghosts of history, figures who once commanded rooms and defined eras, now reduced to partial witnesses of their own lives. We consult the ledgers of long-dead patrons, searching for a match, but the ink has faded, or the pages have crumbled. The identity does not just vanish, it becomes unmoored. Without a face to anchor the memory, the body becomes a generic placeholder, a shadow on a wall that no longer points to a specific human soul. We see the brushstrokes of a master, the precision of a lace collar, or the heavy weight of a crown. But the center of the image remains a void. They are no longer people. They are the debris of time, waiting for a recognition that will never come. Yet, there is a strange, magnetic pull in what remains. A portrait entirely destroyed leaves nothing for the eye to catch. But a portrait with a missing face? It feels more present, more urgent than the original ever could. The void acts as a vacuum, drawing our focus inward, demanding we fill the silence with our own questions. We do not look at the background or the fine details of the frame. We stare directly into the jagged scrape of paint or the hollow space where eyes once met ours. It is an intentional absence that refuses to be ignored. The missing face becomes a mirror for our own curiosity, forcing us to confront the stillness. We find ourselves leaning closer, searching for a ghost in the texture of the canvas, wondering who stood there and what they witnessed before the world turned against their image. The damage does not hide the subject. It highlights the fact that someone was there. It transforms a static piece of history into an active confrontation. We are no longer just observing a relic. We are engaging with a scar. The silence is not empty. It is heavy, layered with the weight of the conflict that demanded this erasure. We turn our gaze from the void to the periphery. When the face is scrubbed, the rest of the image suddenly demands a new scrutiny. Look at the hand resting on the arm of a chair. It is rendered with exquisite precision. Every knuckle and vein mapped by the artist, yet it belongs to an invisible person. A ring glints on a finger, catching the light in a way that suggests a specific life, now severed from its identity. We see the heavy drape of a sleeve, the intricate weave of a collar, the precise placement of a sword hilt. These are the partial witnesses. They are the artifacts that escape the blade or the chisel, left behind as accidental evidence of a presence that was meant to be erased. They do not tell us who the person was, but they confirm that they existed. We trace the brushstrokes on a cuff or the texture of a stone relief, noting how the artist lavished care on these details, unaware that they would eventually become the only proof of the subject. These fragments are not merely decorative. They are the anchors of a reality that the censors failed to fully dismantle. We are left to reconstruct the ghost from the debris, piece by piece. The most revealing portrait is the one that remains incomplete. It stands as a permanent scar on the skin of history, a jagged line drawn through time. When we stand before these canvases, we are not looking at a failure of preservation. We are witnessing an act of defiance. The erasure was meant to be the end of a story, a final stroke of power designed to consign a person to oblivion. Instead, it became the defining feature of the work. Every scrape of the chisel, every deliberate smear of pigment, serves as a testament to the fear that once gripped the halls of power. It speaks of a conflict so intense that the mere sight of a face was deemed a threat to the future. We see the aggression of the past etched into the surface, a record of the very panic that demanded the silence. These portraits do not just show us who was once there, they show us the exact moment the world turned against them. The void is not a lack of information. It is a dense, heavy presence, a marker of the violence required to rewrite the narrative. By trying to hide the truth, the censors only succeeded in making the conflict immortal, leaving behind a scar that refuses to fade. We close the archive now, but the voids remain. Each empty space on the canvas is a locked door, a secret kept by the very medium that was meant to display it. History is not a transparent window into the past. It is a carefully curated gallery, where the most important truths are often the ones scrubbed from the frame. We look at these absences, and we finally understand the game. The archive does not just preserve, it hides. It conceals the faces that threaten the status quo, the figures whose very existence challenge the legitimacy of the victors. By leaving these gaps, history reveals its own hand. It shows us that the act of forgetting is a deliberate, calculated labor. We walk away from these portraits with a new perspective on the silence. It is not empty. It is heavy with the weight of everything that was deemed too dangerous to be remembered. The faces are gone, the names are lost, and the paint is stripped to the base, yet the silence speaks louder than any record. It reminds us that every narrative is built upon a foundation of what has been discarded. We leave these halls, but the gaps stay with us, haunting the edges of our own understanding. The archive is silent, but it is not empty. It is a testament to the power of the missing. We close the book, we dim the lights, and we leave the ghosts to their quiet, permanent vigil.